This is a story about trauma. It's a story about resiliency. It's a story about authenticity, and most of all, it's a story about courage. Jean-Paul Bédard, come on up.
I was giving a talk at a conference last week on the effects of childhood trauma over a lifetime. And of all the speakers on the panel, I was the only one who wasn't a doctor or a licensed therapist. Now, don't get me wrong, the world needs more people in these caring professions. But I left this conference feeling that we'd spent most of the time talking about data, theory, and very little time talking about the people. The beautiful thing about MoMondays is that it's story-driven. It's people like me inviting people like you to dig a little deeper, to pull back the curtain. So I'm going to do that for you. I'm a runner. Wait, I better qualify that. I am a serious, and my wife would say, crazy runner. Last year, I ran over 10,000 kilometers. Yeah, well, I know what you're thinking. That's more than most people drive in a year. But let me pull back that curtain a little bit. I'm not just a runner. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a drug addict. I was diagnosed with bipolar depression, and I was heavily medicated because I'd become suicidal. But, let's not turn this into some downward depressing spiral. I'm going to jump right to the good point. As I stand in front of you, I have been clean and sober now for 18 consecutive years. Yeah. I always get applause at that point, but the real person you should be applauding is my wife. She's the one who sat through all that. When I first sobered up, I started running. And for years, I was escaping. I was running away. But something magical happened along the way. There turned a point where I started running towards myself. And the further I ran, the stronger I became, not only physically, but also emotionally. 2 years ago, I finally got to the point where I could let go of a secret. It had been something that I'd been carrying around my entire life. It had been something that had been sitting inside of me, and it was killing me. I didn't just pull back the curtain, I tore the fucking thing down. For the first time in 40 years, I was able to say, my name is Jean-Paul. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and rape. I entered a treatment program in Toronto that specializes in working with adult survivors of child sexual abuse. 2 weeks later, I was down in Boston to compete in the Boston Marathon. You know what? I was not having a good day. In fact, at one point I was taken off the course because I was hyperventilating from crying so much. They let me back on the course and I finished the race, went back up, had a quick shower, and then my wife and I went back down on the street to grab a bite to eat before our flight back to Toronto. Within a few minutes of being on the street, bang! The first bomb went off. A few seconds later, bang! The second explosion. You've all seen the news, so you know what it was like. It was horrific. When I finally got back to Toronto, I needed to take 4 months off work to deal with the PTSD. It was an incredibly low point of my life. I had zero attention span. I couldn't read. I couldn't watch TV. I could barely have a conversation. But the one thing I could do, I could run. And every morning, I would go out for a run, a long, long, long run. And then I spent the rest of the day sitting on our front porch like Jimmy Stewart in Rear Window. I watched the world pass me by as I stood there dead in my tracks. One sunny day, a father and his young daughter walked past our house on the way to the elementary school down the street. I could see the father was in a hurry. So he did what most parents do. He kind of went off ahead, hoping that this would speed his daughter up. But as every parent can tell you, Little kids live in their own world. They are distracted by anything and everything along the way. And that's when this little girl stopped at the sidewalk at the end of our garden. And she walked into the garden and she made her way towards this concrete bird bath we had at the edge of the garden. And to be perfectly honest, it had long outlived its life as a bird bath. And it was now nothing more than a repository for some decorative stones my wife and I picked up on our walks along the beach. Well, the little girl climbed into the garden, and her father came back to grab her, and that's when he saw me sitting on the porch, and he looked at his daughter, and he said, "Stay out of people's gardens." And the little girl didn't miss a beat. She looked at her father and said, "But Daddy, Mommy lets me do this. This is my wishing bowl. Every day I take a stone out and I make a wish." I could see the father wanted to crawl into a hole and die. Long after the little girl and her father walked away, the words that she said echoed inside of me for the simple reason they gave me faith and hope, two things I so desperately needed. So I decided I wanted to do something special for this little girl. So I looked around in the basement for a piece of wood to make a sign, and all I could find was this old cheese board. So I grabbed the cheese board and a Sharpie marker, and I made this sign that said, "Wishing bowl. Take a stone out to make a wish. Place a stone in to let go of a problem." And my only motivation for doing this was to see the expression on the little girl's face the next time she walked past our house. What I wasn't expecting was the result this would have in my community. People would walk past our house on their way to work, to school, or to the store, and they would stop and they would read this sign and they would smile. And they would bend down and they would either take a stone out or put a stone in. Within 2 weeks, this little bird bath was overflowing with stones that people were bringing from around the neighborhood. My favorite thing is to watch groups of teenagers. And we all know teenagers are very self-conscious people. But they seem to embrace the vulnerability of standing in front of their friends and making a wish or letting go of a problem. There's this one elderly gentleman who comes by every day and he takes a stone out and he carries it with him for the whole day. At the end of the day, he comes back and he puts the stone back in there. Today, if you sit on our porch or if you catch a little glance out the living room window, you're bound to see countless people stop at our now famous wishing bowl. So it's kind of a cool thing, but what has it taught me? I guess I would have to say that I now realize there had to come a point in my life when fear would shut me down. It would bring me to my knees. I'm learning to be a little kinder to myself. I'm learning to bend with gentleness. Today, I choose to surround myself by people who believe in me. As a father and as a husband, the gift that I can give my family is the gift they have so generously given me. It's the freedom and the space to grow. It is within this space that we grow love, and it is within this love that I get community. Thank you. Namaste.